Hello, good day, good day. How is everybody doing today? Dr. Amina here, and I hope your week is turning out, is ending well. We're coming to the end of a week, the first week of spring for those in North America and other temperate countries. Anyway, so today's topic is glycemic index. Explain. I'm gonna really try to give a good summary of glycemic index. Just the other day, a patient asked me, "What's glycemic index?" We always talk to patients about their diets and things that they can do to help optimize their health. And so somebody asks, "What's glycemic index?" Glycemic index is basically an indicator of how much a particular food will increase your blood glucose levels. Okay, so it runs in a scale the scale is 0 to 100, with 100 being for glucose, right? The glycemic index of pure glucose would be 100, right? So everything, the glycemic index of foods would be compared to glucose, right? Now, a low glycemic index food essentially would be a food that is digested and absorbed more slowly, right? So usually some food that, this would usually be foods with a lot of fiber. So your vegetables, especially any green vegetable, green leafy vegetables, broccoli, etc., right? Also, of course, fruits, and then beans and legumes, those things, all fiber rich. And so those foods are going to be digested slowly. And so you're going to have a nice, slow, steady release of the glucose into your bloodstream. And so because we have a nice, slow, steady release, it means that you're not going to have these, the blood sugar is not likely to plummet, and so you are kept satisfied for a longer time. So it's going to be several hours before you get hungry, compared to now a high glycemic index food where it is very rapidly digested and you have very rapid absorption of glucose into your bloodstream. So like juices and candy and sodas and things like that, right? Even other foods like white rice and white flour bread, white potatoes, right? These things are very easily, quickly digested. Glucose is rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream, and so because you have this really high, sudden increase in your blood sugar levels, then you're gonna have a sudden high increase in insulin, and that tends to sometimes overshoot, and because the body's trying to quickly bring the blood sugar back down to steady state. And so because you have that quick drop now, the blood glucose levels drop back, and so you're going to feel hungry quicker. This is compared to the more measured response in the low glycemic index foods, right? So that's why when you have a lot of sugar and candy and refined things like the white potato and white flour and white bread and so on, you're just hungry all the time, right? And that I speak from experience, right? As a former bread lover, I still like bread, but I just try not to eat it. I just don't really eat it as much anymore, or hardly ever. But anyway, so that's why you have more hunger with these low glycemic index foods, because you have this big peak in the blood sugar. The body reacts quickly. It's like, oh my goodness, too much. Let's get this down back to steady state. And then it just kind of plummets quickly in preparation for more, maybe. And then you just get hungry, right? So that's the difference between low and high glycemic index foods. Now, just to give you some more examples, I mentioned for the low glycemic foods, basically natural, usually plant-based foods, your vegetables, like I said, your legumes, even nuts tend to have quite a bit of fiber as well, right? So all those are low glycemic index foods. And then, protein, meat, and so on, those are really obviously low glycemic index. Fat, obviously, is really not going to have an effect on the blood sugar, like olive oil and things like that, right? So glycemic index mainly has to do with kind of carbohydrate type foods, right? Because glucose, of course, is a carbohydrate, simple carbohydrate. And then we're looking at all the other carbs, tubers, vegetables, starches, obvious starches and so on, right? So like white flour bread has a glycemic index of 75. Whole wheat bread, we would think, and we in my family growing up, whole wheat bread was better. But whole wheat bread has a glycemic index of 74. So very similar to white bread. I mean, the same more or less as white flour bread, right? Multigrain bread now, that's bread that you can see the nuts and seeds, and you bite it and it's obviously more crunchy, so that has a low glycemic index, that's 53. So that's notably better than white flour bread or even the whole wheat bread, right? White rice, very high glycemic, similar to white flour, has a glycemic index of about 73. Brown rice, not much better. Glycemic index of 68. So 68 for brown rice versus 73 for white rice. So not much different. I should have looked up the glycemic index for wild rice or black rice, because I know for sure that that's going to be lower than the glycemic index of white and brown rice, right? Spaghetti's glycemic index, I thought it would have been higher, but it's 49, so not terrible. It's like kind of medium glycemic index. Cornflakes, a very popular breakfast staple, glycemic index of 81, sky high, higher than bread, higher than rice, and so on and so forth, right? So cornflakes is just kind of one of those no-nos, and really most breakfast cereals, they're just totally loaded with sugar. They're going to shoot your blood sugars up, and then you're going to be starving by 10 o'clock in the morning, right? So, you know, forget about cereals if you're really trying to be better with your health, especially if you're diabetic and so on. Instant oatmeal has a glycemic index of 79. This is similar to cornflakes, right? 79. That's like, you know, that's just putting your sugars all the way up. And oatmeal is, again, another cereal that's felt to be even maybe like a healthy cereal, oatmeal, right? Healthier than maybe cornflakes, but it's really not much better than cornflakes, right? If you're gonna look at oatmeal, then you're better off with steel cut oats, right? You always want to choose the food that is the least processed, okay? Obviously the steel cut oats, very hard, crunchy, that's going to take a longer time to be digested and to be absorbed compared to the instant oatmeal, which is totally refined, right? And then muesli, that's a sort of like a mix of like grains and whole oats and like flax and other things, nuts sometimes, and that the glycemic index of that one is 57, right? Looking at fruits, apple's glycemic index is only 36, so that's nice and low. Now the sweeter fruits are like banana, glycemic index of 51, pineapple, glycemic index of 59, right? So a little on the sweeter side. Watermelons are actually, they have a high glycemic index, 76, which is pretty high, but watermelons, they're so filling, right? They're like, you know, lots of liquid. So even though it has such a high glycemic index, you're not going to eat enough for it to have such an impact. And then there's this other measure called glycemic load, which I'll leave that for another time. But basically, watermelon is still considered to be okay, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, like a minute or so, right? Peas and beans, chickpeas, glycemic index of 28. Red beans, glycemic index of 24. So definitely beans are good. Carrots, glycemic index of 39. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea about glycemic index. And like what we mean, like we always talk about glycemic index, you know, so that's what it means. Now there are limitations as with any and everything, you know, you have to take everything in context, right? And so of course the obvious one is quantity, how much of whatever it is you're eating. So if you're taking like, you know, one slice of bread and some other things, then it's not going to be as bad as eating 4 slices of bread, okay? Now, most of us don't just have one slice of bread, because bread, again, is very tasty. I think bread is quite addictive. I used to eat probably 3-4 slices at once in my days of eating bread. So it tastes good. You toast it, put some butter in it, cheese, and so it's just so tasty. You want to keep eating it, right? So if you just have one slice, if you have a small amount, not a big deal. For example, the higher glycemic index foods I mentioned, the banana, the pineapple, if you just have a couple pieces and you mix it with some other fruits, is really not going to be a big deal. So you have to consider the quantity when you're looking at the like glycemic index of foods, and don't get too caught up like, oh my, I can't eat this because, you know, it has a high glycemic index. If you're just having a little bit and mixing it with other things, don't worry, right? You also have to compare, consider how it is prepared, how it's processed. I mentioned oatmeal, and the fact that instant oatmeal is just like high glycemic index, it's, you know, high blood sugars, etc., right? But if you have the steel cut oats, which is not processed, nice, you know, closer to the raw form, so you're not going to have that issue with it, right? Other thing, apples, like there's apple sauce and stewed apples and things like that. So if you cook your apple, then the glycemic index is going to be higher, because the process of cooking breaks down the fiber, and so you're gonna have an easier digestion and therefore easier and quicker absorption of the sugar. Same with vegetables. And I always tell people when I'm talking in general, you know, like vegetables and so on, try to cook your vegetables and keep a bit of crunch in them. Usually at home, my house, we steam them for or if we're stir frying, we do it for like 3 to 4 minutes, so it still maintains form, you get the crunch, and you know that there's good fiber in it. The longer you cook them, and especially if you cook them in a lot of water, then it's just gonna be boiled, and then you're gonna have that fiber being broken down, and it's just gonna be mushy, and there's not gonna be much work for your body to do to digest it, and so you're gonna end up with a higher glycemic index, right? So how it is prepared, or if it is processed. And then lastly, what foods are eaten at the same time as the whatever the starch is, right? Or carbohydrate or whatever, right? So if you're eating some bread, right, white flour bread, or like whatever, you at a restaurant and they have some really nice rolls and they're warm, and you just want to have some. But then if there's salad, if you're pairing the bread with salad, or if at home you're making sandwiches but you have a good bit of lettuce and cucumber with the skin especially, so you have all that fiber and maybe some tomato and so on, and then you have some maybe cheese in it or whatever meat it is, so that's also the fat from that is going to help slow down the whole digestive and absorptive process. So it's not going to be as bad as just having a plain sandwich with 2 slices of bread and some cream cheese in the middle, or a bagel with cream cheese in the middle and nothing else, right? So pair it with like a good salad or just something, some fiber or whatever, to help slow down the process, so you don't have that damage, right, to your body, collateral damage. Okay, so I hope you all found this informative. If you have any questions, let me know. We were talking about glycemic index, kind of explaining it for you, and essentially it's a measure of how high a food, especially a starchy food, is going to increase your blood sugar. The factors that sort of impact how high the glycemic index is of a food include how much of it you have, how you prepare it, if it's like refined or if it's closer to raw, and then what else you might pair the food with, right? So if it's like a plain white flour bread, plain white potatoes, but then you're having just a small amount, and then you're pairing it with a lot of vegetables, some peas, beans, whatever legume, then you're not gonna have to worry as much, right? So just kind of be smart with your selections, what you pair them with, sort of moderation, everything in moderation. I usually think there's almost nothing you can't eat, but just be moderate. And in general, when you're eating, if you can have about half your plate be like vegetables, and then maybe a quarter your protein, and then another quarter or a little less your carbohydrate. And the more complex the carbohydrate, the better it is for you, okay? And again, no added sugar is best, as much as you can, or minimal added sugar, 6 teaspoons or less of added sugar per 24-hour period. All right. Well, thank you for watching. I know Doris is watching here, and anybody else, and enjoy the rest of your week.